Well, welcome back, folks, to Jack's Corner, where truth and reality have a seat at the table. As we were celebrating our 250th birthday as a nation, I thank God He blessed me with being born here. My gratitude is not just an empty platitude, because I back it up with actions, words, and deeds. I kept myself informed with the facts, not empty and factless opinions like of others. There is nothing less powerful nor worthless than someone's individual truth. There is the truth, there is a truth, but there is no individual truth. I also open my wallet. I speak facts, not opinions, and I attend political meetings and gatherings to help those who are fighting the good fight for freedom. You've heard it before, freedom is not free, and I'm no freeloader as many are in this country. They want the benefits and none of the responsibility. They don't deserve what they have, folks. I'm also tired of the complainers on my side of the fence who, when asked what they have done to deserve what they have, they are speechless. They think that by just enjoying their comforts and conveniences, that is enough. Well, it's not. They think that by just voting right, that is enough. Not by a long shot, folks. We have allowed so many to leech off the sacrifices of others. We have allowed the enemies of our freedoms into office with empty and deceitful words. We are suffering the consequences of our indolence. It may very likely result in the end of our republic within the next 10 years. If we had a time machine to bring our forefathers back for a brief stay, our Constitution would have been written so differently, from our judiciary to a firm declaration, as we see in many of our state constitutions, that we are a Christian nation. Why is it okay for 57 nations around the world to declare themselves Islamic and India Hindu, but we are not allowed to have a Christian nation? I can just hear our founders demanding the Democrat Party of today being placed on trial for treason. Our founders freed us from the tyranny that the Democrats are now trying to replace with murderous communism, and we see it spreading. Of course, they use the word socialism. There's no difference. It's so bad that it wouldn't surprise me if the founders would skip a trial and just convict the left based on their statements and positions and hang them from the trees around the Potomac. I know what the left has in store for us, and if allowed, we will have a hot, bloody civil war, and we need to avoid that. Too many on my side have never played chess and are clueless from a strategic standpoint and blind to the slaughter we are being led to. Frankly, I find no excuse for incompetence or idiocracy. As I have been doing of late, I'm giving you a rundown of the headlines that should shock you and alarm you and further establish what I have been warning about. So let's get started here with some of these headlines. On Monday's broadcast of CNN's The Source, Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington, an Indian transplant infected with her country's paganism, responded to past statements by Democrat U.S. House nominee Avila Chevalier, who praises communism and Marxism by saying that whatever labels you want to attach to it, whatever she said, I believe that is Jayapal. I believe that we've got to understand that big tent means big tent and voters have to be respected. No, the voters do not have to be respected, folks. We did it, and we didn't respect them in the Civil War either. The voters in the Confederacy were wrong. Today, those who vote left and vote for communists are wrong and must be nullified. They violate the laws and the Constitution every day, and when they do, they must be fined and punished. For example, if the voters voted to kill all Christians or any other group, that would not or should not be respected or enforced. In fact, it would start a long overdue revolution. The growing depravity of the people are the root of the problem. It has been long in the making. All of our blue states are blue because they are a majority atheist today. That's a shame. Why would you expect anything different? There are no historical exceptions to this. They have their own homegrown moral code, a product of their futility. Now, on an interview aired on Monday's broadcast of CNN's The Story Is, Senator Adam Schiff of California also responded to Chevalier's prior far left statements by saying that her views aren't within the Democrat Party's mainstream or reflective of the whole party, and he's not sure that her win is a nationwide trend. But he said, "So I'm not afraid of new members or new ideas in the party. I welcome it." Talk about letting the camel's head into the tent. And as we know, when that happens, the tent comes down. Schiff and his kind laid the foundation for a communist takeover in this country. Schiff, as you should know and remember, was censured for lying to Congress. He is an avowed liar, and he was convicted of it. He is also facing a mortgage fraud claim. He's also a communist sympathizer. He is the worst of the worst. These cases against him need to be advanced expeditiously for his removal from the Senate. Now, on MS Now's The Beat, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey claimed the Supreme Court was both corrupt and compromised. Of course, he provided no proof or facts. Booker said, "We have a corrupt and compromised court in a way we've never seen in American history." Well, I can guarantee you he knows nothing about American history. And he continued on saying that the Supreme Court would make decisions, and we're making decisions that pull power away from everyday Americans, taking away their reproductive rights to control their own body and pulling away their voting rights. I've written about Booker before and disclosed his corruption, his performance antics in Congress, and what a fraud he is. He substitutes any intellect with boisterous and bombastic language and yelling. He never talks facts, only naked opinion. He's yet to propose any logical or rational solution to any of the issues facing the country, because the chaos he tries to create always benefits the Democrats. This is historically a tactic for those bent on totalitarianism. Now, several days ago on MS Now's All In, Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland said President Donald Trump only cared about engaging in voter suppression tactics. What a worn-out lie that is. Historically, the Democrats have always been the ones with their hands in the cookie jar and cheating. They can't even defend the indefensible for opposing voter ID when over 85% of the public want voter ID. With ID, they can't cheat, folks. I know a little bit about voter suppression allegations by the Democrats, as they used that tactic against me when I was chairman. In accordance with state law, I placed poll watchers in polling places to make sure there was no cheating or fraud. The Democrats, along with other NGOs, sued me and the party for voter suppression, and they knew it to be a lie and that they would lose, as my actions were soundly supported by the state statute. Nevertheless, we had to defend the false allegations in federal and state court. We won. Now, the Democrats knew it was a fake claim all along, but the goal was not to win, but to drain us of the money that we had to pay out and had to pay attorneys. This was a strategy the Democrats employed in about a dozen communities around the country that election year. So once again, I speak from tons of experience and fact as to the nature of the Democrats, who have been anti-American all the way back to before the Civil War. Now, this next item will come as no surprise to you. Many Democrats are not expressing American pride ahead of its 250th celebration. Only 8% consider Americans the greatest country on earth. That is 8% of the Democrats. And 90% of Republicans are proud of their country and love it. You see, folks, they have made it so easy for you to know who not to be yoked with. I don't befriend anyone, particularly those who vote in a way to take my freedoms away. Do you? I have nothing in common with these folks. Here's another survey that reveals those who do not deserve this country. The survey by Partisans' Pride in Being an American, 2001 to 2026. So the question was asked, how proud are you to be an American? In the extreme proud category, that is American category from 2001 into 2026, 70% of Republicans and 28% of independents and only 14% of Democrats say they are extremely proud. Democrats reached a new low, and the partisan gap widened substantially over that time. Folks, this is mostly educators and media driven. They have been the enemies of freedom and truth for as long as I have been around. Now, Scripture tells us that liars will not inherit the kingdom, and their just judgment is sure to come. But in the meantime, I would like to see a purge and removal of those who have deceived the multitudes and caused so much division and hate within the country. It's time for severe examples to be made of these groups. It only takes a few to get the rest to conform to the standards of decency, honesty, and truthfulness. So if you hate the country, why should you benefit from it? It's like starving to death. Someone gives you food, and then you hate them and bite their hand. That's the character of the Democrat Party. Look and listen to our foreign guests that have come in for the World Cup. They are amazed. They are in tears because they realize that they have been lied to all their lives about our country. They have fallen in love with it, being over here, not with just what we have, but who we are and with the American people themselves. Remember, the devil is the father of lies, and he has destroyed peoples and countries. He is the master of deception and division. During the 250th celebration, I was surrounded by throngs in Sarasota, Florida, and hundreds of thousands rushing to the beach, all happy. I went through a huge street fair where everyone was laughing and singing and musicians playing. I walked into a grocery store where clerks were singing along with the song Sweet Home Alabama, playing over the loudspeaker. We are a happy and great people, but we have evil ones that have crept onto the stage trying to convince us that we are bad. Now, I will get into what we need to do about that in a bit, but for now, the 250th should be a red letter date in your life because you have been blessed to be here. Let's not forget, there are countries around the world who were also celebrating our 250th. We are that beacon of light to the world and stand in the gap between life, liberty, and happiness and the darkness that evil communists want to shove all of us into. Okay, now back to the sour reality of what needs to be known and done to keep us a great and happy nation. In keeping with my equal opportunity criticizer stance, Ohio Republican Senator Bernie Moreno was correct when he blasted his state's governor, Republican Mike DeWine, for the governor's support of thousands of Haitian migrants that Joe Biden imported into the state as the Trump administration moves to revoke their temporary protected immigration status. The citizens of Ohio have been screaming how their communities have been taken over by the illegals who were supposed to be here only on a temporary basis. DeWine was deaf to their cries. DeWine has always been an unreliable jackass as far as I'm concerned. I've been with him before in the distant past in small gatherings and didn't find much to be enthused about with him. My inclinations were correct then, and the problem when he ran for governor was he was really the only choice we had. DeWine doesn't know when to get out of his own way. What a blunder, always wrong but never in doubt. Folks, the Democrats flooded the country with not the best and brightest from around the world, but those who have nothing to offer but a request for welfare, like the Somalis in Minneapolis, who after 10 years of being here, 54% of them are still on welfare and don't work. That's who the Democrats want. And why is that? Because they will vote Democrat for the handouts and thus keep the Democrats in power. Folks, the Democrats care nothing for you or those they flooded into the country. They are only a tool. You can't name one thing the Democrats are for and what their plans are for the betterment of this country. All you hear is how bad we are as a country. Now look at this so-called comedy duo, Rosie O'Donnell and Jimmy Kimmel. In fact, when were they ever funny? Look at the smiles. The anti-American Rosie O'Donnell, back from her self-imposed exile in Ireland and facelift, shows what a sour sow she is, full of hate and guile. She can't even smile right. I don't think I've ever seen an inverted smile like that. She looks like a wolf ready to bite your neck. It's a disguised frown, folks. This bitter witch, doped up with anti-anxiety meds, forces her demented mug in our faces once again. Now she is to substitute for Kimmel when he's away. When is this show going to be canceled and charged with campaign finance violations due to its political promotions? When is ABC going to take this sour, witless moron, now plural, off the air? When will we, as a people, punish ABC by boycotting it? Okay, now moving on, let's talk about an apostate, a false teacher, and a reprobate, that is Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia, who recently addressed the IKAR synagogue in Los Angeles and used the opportunity to deliver a host of observations excoriating those who, in his opinion, exercise homophobia and transphobia. Warnock, a Baptist pastor, and I can assure you he knows nothing about Baptist, and neither does anyone who ever sat in his pews, much less the gospel. He clearly doesn't know Scripture, and he doesn't seem to have any knowledge or fear of what Scripture says will become of people like him. Warnock joined Rabbi Sharon Boros in a public exchange after his initial sermon, but not before he espoused his condemnation for those that oppose his views, saying that transphobia is violence not only against humanity but against divinity. It is an offense to the glory of God. Well, that's exactly what God doesn't say. That is blasphemy, and his penalty will be severe and everlasting. Well, we know Warnock's destiny. He told us he is an apostate and a heretic. And the Bible is very clear. Those like him are destined to hell. And once again, the counterfeit demoniacs are coming out of the woodwork in this political season. And they are all Democrats and registered Democrats who twist Scripture for their political ends. But we know their end. Religion aside, for him to say transphobia is an offense to God is a desecration to the faith and a blaspheme. But more than that, you have every right to fear mentally ill people who pretend to be something they are not. And I can tell you for a certainty that Warnock is a false prophet. For those in Georgia, I will tell you that to support this man, knowing what you know about him, you need not have any expectations of paradise in the afterlife yourself. Christians do not support evil. Now let's talk a little bit about the suicidal Supreme Court that recently upheld birthright citizenship. As I have said most of my legal career, you can always trust a liberal to be a liberal, but you can never count on a conservative to be conservative. Stated another way, conservatives allow our enemies to use our freedoms against us. Justice Roberts has been a problem from his very beginning on the court. He's more interested in his legacy than he is effectively preserving our Constitution and our freedoms by fighting the liberals who are intent on destroying the Republic and the Constitution that he swore to uphold. Amy Barrett, upon her nomination, was supposedly a conservative in the mold of Justice Clarence Thomas. No, folks, she's a woman. But it is that gender that is destroying the country because of their emotions, not the head that rules their ways. To make things worse, in Barrett's case, she had the opportunity to preserve the future for her own children and failed to do so. No Democrat would have won the presidency after JFK if it had not been for the female vote, and it has only gotten worse over time. I can just hear the feminists now wailing and now screaming, misogyny, misogyny. As far as I'm concerned, you can just take that accusation of misogyny and stick it where the sun doesn't shine, because I'm right on the facts and they bear me out. Now, a month ago, I did a deep dive and analysis of the birthright issue, and I wrote about it. The law as it has been applied is not correct. You don't need to be a Supreme Court justice to figure that out. Now, I won't get into the legal analysis of it now as it is too long, but suffice it to say, children of diplomats born here do not become citizens. So that very inconsistent treatment of others is incongruous and cannot be reconciled. Folks, the decision is so blatantly and patently wrong, a keen mind must conclude that there was a snake in the woodpile somewhere. The decision was not based on reason, logic, or law, but outside influences. No wisdom was applied or justice done. And for the damage done to a nation and world, may they suffer eternal shame just as the justices created the right to abortion. Let me give you just a short example of the many ways birthright citizenship is destroying the country and how our enemies are using it. For example, the Chinese have created an industry where they send pregnant Chinese women over to the U.S. where they have their babies. And the babies become U.S. citizens, and then they go back to China and the children are raised communist. But guess what? They get to vote in our elections once they reach age, and the numbers are large enough to sway the outcome of elections. According to Schweitzer, the author of The Invisible Coup, the depth of birth tourism is unclear, but he noted that the Chinese government boasts of more than 1 million Chinese who have U.S. citizenship as a product of birthright citizenship. This is how you would take over your enemy, and that's exactly what they're doing. It's a Trojan horse, and these fools in the black robes are too stupid to understand that. Even the corrupt Senate leader Harry Reid, a Democrat years ago, was opposed to birthright citizenship and proposed a revision to the law that would ban that practice. I anticipated that these incompetent jurists to trip over their own feet, so I came up with what the solution should be. Ban any woman who is pregnant from entering the country. And if one becomes pregnant while in the country, they have to leave after the first trimester. Moreover, I would include in that bill that it is beyond judicial review, which is Congress's right, as Congress is the branch of government that sets the jurisdiction of the courts. Since these judicial morons can't get it right or protect the country and interpret the Constitution correctly, take away their powers, which lies within the Congress's province. I'm utterly disgusted with those on my side of the political spectrum. Many are totally inept when given positions of power, either due to cowardice or compromise. Folks, having practiced law for over 46 years and awarded senior counselor status, please disabuse yourselves of all the people on the Supreme Court being smart. No, they're not all smart, and I know they are not. And I have argued too many cases in the state courts and federal courts to know. After all, Justice Jackson on the Supreme Court can't even define what a woman is. What should that say to you? Either she is really that stupid, and in fact she is, and behind closed doors the others will tell you so, or she is profoundly dishonest, and she is that too. Let's talk about the enemies of the Republic for a minute. So, who are the enemies of the Republic? Is it you? Now, not so quick. You just might be surprised. And I'm about to give you the proof. Anyone who tolerated communist teachers and professors to teach your children are the enemy. You are technically guilty of child abuse. How do you think this generation came to believe that communism, that hides behind the word socialism, came to be in vogue with the younger generation? Well, folks, you paid for it. You were not paying attention. You were lazy. You were indulgent in a lifestyle you thought would last forever without you having to do anything but pleasure yourself. You are wrong, and your children are growing up with communists. It will destroy you and your children and cast the world back into barbarity. Nearly 1/3 of Democrats favor political leaders who identify as democratic socialists. According to reporting by Breitbart News, a new poll was revealed that based on recent primary victories, a self-described democratic socialist, the Democrat Party's ideology is in that direction, the direction of socialism and communism. Folks, there is no such thing as socialism. It's only a disguise that communism wears to fool the simpletons of life. They now have an army, and the recruiters are still free. They belong in prison. And why are they still allowed to spread their poison and mentally abuse your children? These people should have been put on trial 2 decades ago. So you need to wake up. How could you have allowed this to happen? It is not the bad guys who you should expect to do bad things, because they always do. But it's the good guys who do nothing in the face of known evil that we face. There is no excuse, because hundreds of thousands of our military men and women have become casualties over the last 100 years fighting communists. There are so few of us in the fight to save the Republic, and too few that know how serious the threat is. The danger has been so loudly proclaimed that there is no excuse for anyone to have tolerated these reprobates who are tearing down the country in the name of free speech. I cry for the kids who so many of you brought into this world only to turn them over to communist subjugation. The day cannot come soon enough for those who are responsible to suffer the consequences of the evil they have allowed to consume us. Now, let me explain to you how there was no innocence in our country's slide towards communism. In fact, it has been very methodically implemented. There was nothing organic about it. It was all intentional. Now, Dr. Carl Jung warned that totalitarian regimes such as the Nazis and the Communists are not imposed on healthy populations. They grow out of one that is already psychologically and spiritually unwell. That sounds like us, doesn't it? 65% of the blue states are atheists, a key element and requirement for communist takeover. Moreover, the Democrats have embraced every perversion from transgender to the full range of the alphabet crowd, and free speech is only allowed for the left, and only hostility towards Christianity. Well, we are there as far as moral corruption. Whites have lost their collective minds, being afraid of being called a racist. If you fit into that category, what's wrong with you? Why would you care if somebody calls you that name? Moreover, if you are defamed by that name, sue them for every penny they have. And if your employer fires you based upon these false claims, sue them into bankruptcy. You know, in 1957, Dr. Jung found that before totalitarianism can take hold, people must first lose their sense of self. And he had 5 warnings or 5 lessons. And his first lesson was that reason only works to a point. Rational argument can only be conducted only so long as the emotionality of a given situation does not exceed a certain critical degree. At that point, reason ceases to have any effect. We have seen that play out with the violence on the left in the protest against our border control officers enforcing the law. Try reasoning with the blue-haired, pierced, tattooed women, white women. At this point, they resort to adjectives and slogans that are wildly imaginary and unrealistic fantasies. Debate becomes useless. Scripture tells us not to argue with fools. Folks, when a child becomes unruly, the only thing left is a good spanking. The left in this country need more than that. They need institutionalization. Now, lesson 2 is the most dangerous people look completely normal, but whose views and behavior, for all their appearance of normality, are influenced by unconsciously morbid and perverse factors. We see that in so many of the less than manly male Democrats from the Northeast today, such as Murphy and Cohen, and then you have Booker. Now, lesson 3, you don't actually know yourself, and that's the gap tyrants exploit. Oh, how true this is for the whites in this country and the rest of the Western world. Here we stand defenseless and open to all kinds of influences and psychic infection. I blame weak men allowing the advance of demonic feminism, which is at the core of the problem. Now here's lesson 4. When people lose God, they make the state their God. The state has taken the place of God. That is why the socialist dictatorships are religions and state slavery is the form of worship. The state becomes sacrosanct and above criticism. Its leader, a demigod, is beyond good and evil. The terrifying part is not that tyrants seek to control society, it's that the crowd longs to be controlled. And finally, lesson 5. The only real defense is becoming someone that the crowd cannot dissolve. Resistance to the organized mass can be effected only by the man who is a well-organized person in his individuality, as the mass is itself. Jung did not only diagnose the disease, but offered a cure. The antidote to mob rule is the well-formed and strong individual. The mad-as-hell man and woman, as was portrayed in the movie Network, who is not going to take it anymore and they push back in a forceful and determined way against society and the evils of society. The state understands this better than the subjects do, which is why it works towards atomization and the psychic isolation of the individual. Now get this, the more unrelated citizens are, the more consolidated the state becomes. And where love stops, power begins, and violence and terror. Now moving on with tongue-in-cheek, I would like to be czar. And czar of what? Well, when Trump becomes king, as the lying Democrats tell you he wants to be, I'm going to ask him to be czar over the liberal Democrat purge and maybe a handful of Republicans sprinkled in. As a teenager, I was reading books by William F. Buckley regarding the liberal mania, the liberal sickness, And if given the opportunity, I would drive the liberals off the cliff like Pied Piper did the rats. After over 50 years of deep study of the nature of the liberal mindset, it is truly psychotic and a basic danger to the world. Because of them, we are now having to fight communism on our shores. It threatens a return to barbarity out of which the Christian moral code pulled us out of. The left wants a return to those days. After all, they told you they needed the aliens to pick their avocados. And I know these devils, folks. After 50 years, I can predict their next move and their next lie. I can also spot a fake Republican from 1,000 miles away. So why do I do these podcasts and yell out these warnings? Well, I regret that the fools of my generation have destroyed the world that we grew up in, not recognizing the danger and evil of the left that infected the Democrats. We failed, and there really is no justifiable excuse. I have a love for the younger generation who do not deserve what we have created. I literally loathe those of my generation who were so selfish as to bankrupt the country and the Western world of any good, and it was all done for their pleasures and to the detriment of the next generation. I weep for the hundreds of American casualties around the world who fought and died to protect us from communism, only for the corrupt in this country to weaken us from the inside. Now, I know, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and even as I tried to think of a punishment suitable for the sins of the left and the communists, I know that God's retribution will be even more exquisite and just, but we must warn and do what we can to spare today's generation. Now, I must continue pressing the point of the lowlifes that are leading this country and are killing it, and I will do so by pointing out individual elected leaders who should never have been seated in Congress. Now, this next example is someone that I had hoped by now would have exited Congress, but sadly not. This moron from Georgia said that if Democrats do not win the midterm elections, Black Americans will be back in the cotton fields. That imbecile is none other than Representative Hank Johnson of Georgia. Well, Mr. Johnson, they have machines now that do that, but even if we didn't, you wouldn't even be qualified to do that. Johnson and most Democrats suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a cognitive bias where people with limited knowledge or competence in a specific area greatly overestimate their own skills. Democrats are examples of the Dunning-Kruger effect on steroids. Mr. Johnson, in a congressional hearing of our military, actually thought islands floated. You heard me right. It's on video. Just think about it. That speaks loudly about his constituents down in Georgia. If you are that dumb, you shouldn't be voting, and surely should not be sitting in Congress. Here's one more example of an anti-American Democrat, and that is far-left Muslim Michigan Senate candidate Abdul El-Sayed, who said he will prioritize gender-affirming care, genital mutilation surgery, puberty blockers, and hormone therapy as part of his platform. You see, folks, the Democrats needed stupid foreign people because only stupid people vote Democrat. Mr. El-Sayed and his kind throw gays off the tops of buildings, folks. And Mr. El-Sayed also belongs to a religion that allows lying, which they call taqiyya, a principle in Islam that allows Muslims to hide their identity when necessary for them to gain power and advance their ideology, and then it's okay to lie. You heard that right. Islam, which means submission, is not a religion. It's time to learn what it is and not assume nor accept what they say it is, because they basically have the grace to so-called lie. And lying is built into their programming. Now, folks, I'm calling for zero tolerance of communists and its euphemistic term socialism. They are the enemies of humanity. 120 million witnesses could testify to it, but for the fact that they were murdered by communists. It's time to outlaw communism and ban any foreign-born from holding office and deport all illegals. We must oust all those from office who have supported the leftist scourge in this country and remove any judicial review of laws passed to enforce these measures. After all, Congress, like I've said before, controls the jurisdiction of the courts, and it's time to start enforcing it because the judges today are either overtly political or see the Constitution as a suicide pact. Now, this next topic I call defund the Kentucky Supreme Court, and let me tell you why. It's time for the Kentucky House to defund the Kentucky Supreme Court since it declared itself this year beyond accountability and stated in a recent ruling that it could not be impeached. Can you imagine that? They even violated the law by threatening criminal prosecution against legislatures who did their constitutional duty. We were better off before the creation of the Supreme Court in Kentucky when all we had were courts of appeal around the state. We are now seeing the danger of power-hungry jurists who now think they have immunized themselves from any accountability. And oh, by the way, most of them are Democrats. Are you surprised? Now, get a load of this. This witch with a capital B, yes, another liberal irrational woman who, despite claiming to be the most bipartisan member of Congress, and that's Representative Susie Lee of Nevada, said in June that the U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth made her want to beat the shit out of him. Folks, the Democrat left are hateful and violent people. They can't constrain themselves. Can you imagine if they had the power to do what they wanted to do? No one would be safe. When Elon Musk raised his hand at Trump's inauguration, they called him a Nazi. Well, here we see Lee raising a fist, a communist fist. And there's no complaint about that. Folks, it's time to fight this evil while you still have the chance. Well, moving on to another topic on our 250th anniversary of the greatest nation on the face of earth and in all of human existence, I know exactly what I'm grateful for and what I'm celebrating. God has blessed us immensely, and if you want to lose what He's given you, just keep showing ingratitude by tolerating and enabling the godless left. Evil has never made itself easier to identify and combat because it's so obvious and transparent. Now, the burden is upon you to do something about it. You must become intolerant to evil. In fact, you need to seek it out and wipe it out. And you have so many means with which to do that. You can start by exposing it or them and telling others who, what, and where they are. Then ostracize them. Do not enable them. Eliminate their funding. Boycott any company or institution that funds them. Now, during this great celebration of the 250th anniversary of this country, the demonic influences crawled out of the woodworks, saying how they hated this country and how bad it was. And while at the same time, millions of foreign guests were here for the World Cup extolling how wonderful this country was, that should have told you everything. The enemies of freedom have crawled out from under their rocks, like Joy Reid, and talked about how she hated this country. Of course, she's just another one of the black racist hustlers that we have wrongly tolerated. But there are many more out there where Reid came from, and they are all communist folks hiding behind the socialist label. So our biggest problem is not that these reprobates exist, but rather most of us are toxically tolerating them when we should be eliminating them from any position of influence. It's way past time to become intolerant of the Democrats, the left, and the progressives, and the so-called socialists, who are really the pathway to communism and death. Defend yourselves, defend your freedoms, and defend this country from these radicals. Now I want to talk about attempted murder, for which I want to see prosecutions, trials, and incarcerations, if not executions. Alex Marlow, executive editor of Breitbart News, recently said in regard to data suggesting that democratic socialists are the so-called overeducated who learn to hate America at school. So we're talking about highly educated people. And this is very consistent with what Dennis Prager has said when he said, you go to college and then you learn how to hate this country. I wrote about this in my book, America's Systemic Psychosis. And this hatred is not organic or natural, it's inorganic, meaning it was taught and caught. This was intentional. So the element of intent to do harm is present. The time for the maximum penalty for those in education needs to come about. Folks, how stupid can we be? This is like hiring a babysitter and while you are gone, the babysitter teaches your children to hate you. How could you allow this to happen? Folks, this is an attempted murder of your country and your children's mental health and future. As in the movie Network, Howard Beale, played by Peter Finch, was a newscaster and was fed up with all the lies and went rogue on the TV set, and later out his apartment window started screaming, "I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." Well, folks, it's time for you to do the same, as I just said. I love this country and love God even more that he placed me here instead of one of those hellholes around the world that Trump has talked about. If you have thought so little about God's blessings that you are in this country, then his judgment is going to be severe on you, and you will lose what he has blessed you with. And lest I be ungrateful for what God has given me, it's time for me and time for you to yell out and act out what Howard Beale yelled out in the movie, and that is, you should be sick and tired of the liberals and the leftists, and you need to scream out that you are as mad as hell and not going to take it anymore and actually do something about it for a change. So get up out of your chairs, light those metaphorical torches, and grab those pitchforks and start hunting down those who have tried to destroy you and your children's happiness. I want to see torches lit and the pitchforks out. We need to hunt down these wicked, evil reprobates that have caused so much harm. And you might as well start with the teachers' unions and move on to the universities. These are where the real criminals of humanity hide out. They are child abusers. Now, here's a newsflash. This has nothing to do with free speech or opinion. No one has a right to an opinion that is divorced from fact. That's called a lie, and lies have no rights. So I'm calling for a new Declaration of Independence, an independence from those who live a lie and demand you live one with them. It's time for the destruction of the Democrat Party and the outlawing of communists. We can do that and, in the process, remove the Supreme Court's jurisdiction from any review. They can't be trusted, as with the Birthright citizenship decision that they just came down with. These wannabe communists in our schools and universities need to be removed from any position of influence. They need to be institutionalized. No more nice guy to those who are guilty of attempting to murder your life, liberty, and happiness. This is a second call to freedom, a call for zero tolerance for those who hate the country and want to enslave us. It's time to declare war on the lie and the liars. Okay, folks, well, that'll do for today. Time to rise up and exercise the power that you have to get rid of the totalitarian beast that is devouring America. And until next time, I'm Jack Richardson for Jack's Corner.